I grin smugly at the slack-jawed Vrithitso sitting on my operating table, rapidly flexing my internal spellcasting muscles to sterilize her severed finger before it finishes dropping into my stomach. While I certainly admit to some personal satisfaction at eliciting this response from young Lark, there is some practical purpose to my sudden carnivorous display. In my experience, nothing helps a lesson stick inside one's mind more than a little bit of drama. The same is true even for a girl with perfect memories, I suspect. Remembering a lesson is not the same as keeping it in the forefront of one's thoughts. Still, in the short term, I am already regretting this. I am First Lady Penelope Vesuvius the Inhuman, and I must regretfully admit that uncooked Vrithitso flesh is the single most disgusting thing I have ever eaten. Including my penchant for auto-cannibalism, which at least has the excuse of being inherently efficient and guaranteed sterile. Watcher's eyes, though, it has nothing on this inconceivably repulsive flavor. I feel like I have just consumed a rotting sulfur and fish sausage marinated in diarrhea. I'm going to need to wash the inside of my mouth for weeks, and I'm seriously considering using cognomancy to remove the damn memory. Unfortunately, that will leave evidence on my soul that I can ill afford. Anyway, I make a mental note to add the wretched flavor of Vrithitso flesh to my physical notes, because science is equal parts rigor and suffering, and I see no point in omitting valuable data from the records, no matter how arbitrary it may seem. That's all I need from you, by the way, I tell Lark, who manages to pick her jaw of glorious teeth up off the floor. For today, I mean. I have a council meeting later and I would like to get these samples situated before then. The Vrithitso stutters. Does that mean you, are going to eat them, Mom? I allow myself a chuckle. No, I tell her honestly. You taste horrid. I enjoy watching her expression twist between relief at the idea that I won't continue, horror at the implication that I would have eaten them had she not tasted so unpalatable, and most entertainingly, a confused sort of offense at the idea that she does. I must say, out of all of Vita's strays, this one is by far my favorite. She is both fantastically useful and endlessly fun to tease. Not to mention, well, as I watch her swing her legs off my operating table and stand up to retrieve her armor, I find myself enraptured by the unparalleled poetry that is her body. The tight tapestry of muscles underneath her skin, the beautiful interwoven web of additions to her human frame, each adapted and modified from the base creature with such unparalleled genius I cannot help but feel a churning, invigorating inadequacy. She stretches and smooths her talons against the floor, controlled enough to not damage the wood as her almost impossibly powerful legs carry her across the room. Her quills thrum a brief, discordant tune as she leans down, sucking energy out of the world with nothing but a thoughtless movement. One of her forearms scratches her back as the other three efficiently coordinate the reassembly of her plate armor, the motion practiced and perfected yet coming from a girl with barely any experience at the act. In both mind and body, Lark is gifted beyond measure, and I must force myself to suppress a shudder of pleasure at the thought of unlocking that power for myself. Lark, I call to her as she leaves. I mean it. You don't need the mask. She pauses, her armor once again obstinately hiding her beauty. She nods politely in my direction. Thank you, Mom, she says without enthusiasm, and departs the room. A bittersweet exit, but not an unexpected one. If only she could get over her incessant self-destructive whinging, she would be perfect. As is, she's far too vulnerable to emotional manipulation and far too devoted to my enemies. I can't believe I had to resort to spouting religious drivel to drill my point through her skull. I look forward to helping her develop the confidence to make her own moral judgments before opening the closet door in which the church has carelessly stuffed every last crime they've committed and letting it all collapse on her head. Then she'll be free, and that will be as good as being mine. I push away the last of that whimsical anticipation. I have things to do, and enjoying victory is an activity only worthwhile after actually achieving victory. In many ways this was my pleasure for the day. Now I must immerse myself in work. I take the samples to preservation, letting myself thoughtlessly cast the necessary spells on them as I puzzle through the oddities of Lark's biology. Obviously, a significant amount of natural biomancy occurs within her body when she regenerates and presumably also when she develops new traits, but I can't bloody find where the spell gets formed. I know she uses normal mana, a constant stream of it flows into her soul, passing through her quills and teeth in order to power their enchantments, but rather than being formed into spells within said soul the mana just vanishes. Perhaps this is related to her spatial magic-powered digestive system, but I've yet to divine how. Frustrating, yet engaging. My favorite kind of problem. Unfortunately, I have countless other problems that I need to solve as well. I can't believe that there was once a point in my life in which I looked forward to the roles and responsibilities of a First Lady. To be clear, I certainly appreciate the power and the prestige, but if I could get out of all these damn government meetings and focus more on my work, I would be quite grateful. Alas, Vulca would likely collapse into a sniveling heap without my assistance, and I do happen to live here and thereby possess significant incentive to prevent that. I store Lark's severed digits with the rest of my collected Vrithitso parts and exit my laboratory complex, taking in the sights and sounds of my beloved city. Templar Yelisaveta's absolutely magnificent sensorium is almost too powerful to make use of, but I am quite glad I successfully identified how it functions. Implementing it into my own body has been a slow process, and one that I am purposely performing with imperfection, as I fear simply co-opting every improvement simultaneously would be dangerously overwhelming. Instead, I've been improving each of my senses little by little, and while this process is nowhere near complete, even the early stages highlight the beauty of the world in ways I would have never previously been capable of experiencing. I amuse myself by meeting the awed stares of the populace, my hands clasped primly behind my back as I walk down busy streets on my way to the Capitol building. I possess neither escorts nor guards, confident in both the lack of interest my city has in harming me and my capacity to destroy anyone that tries regardless. The structure we nobles meet the king in has regained some of its ostentatious pointlessness since that moment 2 years prior where I kneeled before Templars barely disguising their attempt to cleanly and legally murder me under the pretense of war. The previously wooden building has now been replaced with proper stone construction, grand and artistic in ways I'll never understand the human obsession with. Insultingly, there are multiple small tentacle motifs throughout the outside of the building, as if this place was a goddamn chapel rather than a government structure. They aren't even being subtle about it, and somehow that's the part that rankles me the most. Well, hello there, Vesuvius, Galdra drawls in that aggravatingly lackadaisical tone of hers. The wretched woman is a High Templar first and foremost, which often makes people forget the fact that she is also a true lady and therefore, as if by some cosmic joke, fully capable of influencing government policy. She falls into step beside me as I enter the Capitol building, insisting on annoying me with her proximity. Hello there, first and true Lady High Templar Galdra Cathola the Annihilator, I schmooze back at her, watching her lips crinkle upward with amusement at my use of her entire list of titles. If Galdra has a single redeeming quality, it is the fact that she is easy to manipulate. Unfortunately, I gain relatively little from manipulating her, because she is a woman trained to do very little other than kill and follow orders, and I'm not the one giving her those orders. Nonetheless, I have seen the difference between how Galdra treats people she finds amusing compared to people she finds detestable, and I am firmly incentivized to remain in the former category. Are you as excited to spend 3 hours discussing sewage maintenance budgets as I am? She asks, removing her helmet in an uncharacteristic display of basic social graces. I suspect her only motivation for doing so is that she was feeling stuffy. Indeed, I will be precisely as riveted to the discussion as you, I answer, admitting quite honestly that I intend to tune out the entire meeting. I'm surprised that you've yet to flee outside the walls of the city, Lady Cathola. Days like this make me wish I was still a hunter. It's imperative that I attend these meetings so that I don't miss anything important. This is, after all, where all of the highest level government decisions get passed down from, but surprising no one, it turns out that the majority of governance is quite boring and entirely irrelevant to my objectives. My position in these discussions boils down to joining the side that wins me the most political sway, which is usually decided long before any arguments are brought to the table. My presence is almost entirely performative and paying attention would be useless drudge work, which is why I prefer to spend the time further transforming myself into a crime against nature. Nature, after all, is terrible, and therefore every crime against it is a victory for all of us. I wish I could be out burning things, Galdra grumbles. Unfortunately, I'm being kept home in case I need to burn our little baby blackbird. Honestly, Vesuvius, if you could fudge whatever papers you need to in order to make the brass think she's safe. I will fudge nothing, I respond testily, because this incorrigible baboon of a woman seems to have forgotten that we are in public, but you will be happy to know that Lark is genuinely stable, mentally speaking. And I suppose you'd know, lady inhuman? Galdra guffaws insipidly, with all the self-satisfied humor of someone who brought a painted rope to a snake exhibition. I laugh along with her, dig out my sanity as if it were an old inside joke while the two of us file into the legislative hall. I'm used to it. If I had a pebble for every time I heard an off-handed comment implying that I have metaphorically lost my marbles, I could fill the hole in the city by stacking them all the way up from the mists. Most people, after all, are far too stupid to comprehend any perspective other than their own. They don't want brilliant golden eyes, they don't want fangs, they don't want to be anything other than the unassuming little creatures they already are, and so they run the idea that I wish for more through their minds and end up unable to draw any conclusion other than insanity. Some days, it is difficult to continue believing in the value of leading them to greater things. Yet continue I do, and their insipid whispers always seem to quiet when I yield results. The legislative hall is as drab and boring as the name implies, and the smattering of still living true nobles within are not much more interesting. While a few other remarkable individuals have been inducted into our ranks since the perception event slew most of the upper class, the majority of the nobility are survivors of that disaster, and the majority of the survivors, surprise, surprise, are either closely allied to the church or straight-up members of it. Oh certainly, the Templars were all out of the city defending us from Vrithitso, and Lord Taftan was all the way in one of the port cities visiting his grandson, and so on down the line. Does everyone have the perfect excuse to have not been around? Lady Etna is just about the only noble from before the perception event that I actually respect, and she only managed to survive because she moved to New Talsey to install a teleportation system for Salt. Soon enough, the king enters with much ceremony, along with his escort of Templars. Having 2 years of experience reading speeches written by other people has, I must begrudgingly admit, improved his skill in doing so. The child is now a rank expert at having other people shove words down his throat while sticking their nose up his ass, and I can only assume that he is quite pleased with himself because of it. I pay a modicum of attention to what he's saying out of respect to the infinitesimal chance that any of it matters, but I turn the majority of my attention within. Being stuck sitting in a chair for hours on end is an ideal time to make modifications to my body, after all. It would be quite rude to start wiggling my fingers under the table, of course, but I solved this problem over a year ago. Instead of moving my hands, I flexed the many tongue-like prehensile spellcasting muscles I designed and grew in place of my rather useless reproductive system. I kept everything necessary for the fun parts of sex, but the rest was just wasting space. I figure if I ever go batshit insane enough to want to grow a child in my belly, I can always just put the womb back. Precise, complex movement is required to perform somatic spellcasting, but there's certainly no reason the movement has to come from fingers. These custom-made internal organs offer countless benefits, from obvious things like immunity to having my hands bound to more complicated advantages such as the capacity to cast more than 2 spells at once, to fool skilled casters about what spell I'm actually casting, and to rapidly increase the speed of casting any spell complicated enough to benefit from using my fingers and new organs in tandem. I am the only person in the world that knows I am capable of performing these feats, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible. This is why I repurposed the metal of my necklace into a ward against mana sight and anchored it inside my body. Anyone looking at me with metamancy will see that I am channeling, but they will be unable to see any of the spell configurations I craft within my own body. They will therefore assume I am simply channeling as a training exercise, because much like Galdra I have taken to doing precisely that during the entirety of my waking hours. All mishaps I've suffered due to this dangerous practice have, so far, been recoverable, and the improvement has been measurable. I therefore have no intentions to stop. As much as I have made my dedication to superior physical form obvious on the outside, any biomancer checking my internal organs will see far, far more. I have multiple redundant hearts, livers, and kidneys to prevent any wounds from killing me too quickly to heal. I have drastically increased skeletal density and muscular capacity, completely restructured joint designs that enable free range of movement for nearly any part of my body, a nigh inviolable immune system, a near instantaneous capacity to clot wounds, and the ability to slowly regenerate any body part without needing to cast a spell to accomplish it, up to and including my brain. Today I am continuing my month-long development of an organ to convert magical energy into chemical energy. This will, regrettably, not remove my need to eat, but it will function almost identically to Bentley's talent and largely remove my need to eat for energy. Magic can reinvigorate me, just not replace the physical matter that my body is composed of. All of the theory and testing is complete, I merely need to finish the actual process of growing the organ, which requires careful supervision. The next 3 hours of my life are therefore not wasted, but I am still thankful when the meeting comes to an end. The budget that was ultimately decided on is laughably insufficient, but I have a monopoly on mold-proofing wood, so I can just quietly bump it up to sane levels using my personal wealth. Obviously, I give no indication that I have any intention or ability to throw money around like this, and publicly pretend that I rely on government funding for my work. I swiftly exit before I can be trapped by a chatty High Templar, returning to my laboratory as soon as I'm able. I'm gaining the reputation of somewhat of a recluse recently, as I rarely leave my work except for government meetings and the pro bono biomancy work I still perform once a 10-day. It's a reputation that suits me just fine, however, and I happily live up to it as I descend into the bowels of my workshop. I am, to put it bluntly, the best biomancer in Vulca by several orders of magnitude. Everyone knows this. As such, nearly every biomancy-related problem in the country at some point passes over my desk, and all of the actually important ones are seen to by me personally. I have over 24 biomancers under my direct employ within this facility, as well as a handful of professional servants and a collection of skilled slave laborers. All of them restrict themselves to the ground and upper floor, because it is the basement levels in which I perform disease work. It is restricted by virtue of sheer practicality. Anyone entering the lower levels without my direct oversight will quite unavoidably find themselves a test subject, and therefore locked in with the serial killers, rapists, and other unforgivables already sentenced to serve their punishment by my capable hands. The boon of human experimentation greatly accelerates my capacity to innovate and improve, and using death row convicts means I get all the fun without any of that pesky moral degeneracy. I can, after all, read the souls of my victims to double-check that the courts have done their due diligence. Justice is so much easier with cognomancy involved. Personally, I think the best part of having a top-secret biological weapons development lab is that I can quite legally install the kind of protective enchantments that would be considered excessively paranoid within the king's own bedchambers after 2 weeks of daily assassination attempts. No matter what I cast in here, no matter what I do in here, not a whiff of it will reach the outside world, with the obvious exception of regular government and church investigation and oversight. Which is why, of course, I merely walk down here to disguise the mana signature of teleporting into my actual secret lab. There's no teleportation enchantment on my property. I'm not stupid enough to leave something like that where anyone could get it. Instead, I have to cast the entire spatial spell by hand, and internal organ, which is not an easy task. Spatial magic is absurdly complicated, requiring such large and intricate magic configurations that the average mage would kill themselves by attempting even the most basic spell. I am no average mage, and I have access to the reverse-engineered version of Capita's self-translocation. While she can pop around like the maniac she is, I don't have the luxury of merely funneling mana through pre-constructed soul pathways. It takes me over 6 minutes of continuous casting to complete the massive spell configuration, and another 3 to triple-check it for errors that could potentially end my life. I let the spell complete, and appear at home. Not the building I purchased for use as a home, but my actual home, an underground complex accessible only by teleportation or swimming through about a mile of underground lake. Rustic and rugged, decorated only by pale, vine-like chemosynthetic organisms, my multi-level sanctuary is exactly how I like it and exactly how I left it. Carved from natural cave formations, each room is a unique and pleasing beauty, far superior to any man-made artistic construction. But the real reasons I consider this a superior home are more personal in nature. "Welcome home, Lady Vesuvius," a familiar voice greets me warmly. Walking into the room to greet me is a young woman with pale skin, thin frame, raven black hair and eyes like solid blue sapphires split with black from top to bottom. Crafted to look exactly like Vita as I made her 2 years ago, my personal maid smiles at me in a way I know the real Vita never would have. A bubbling pit of revulsion pools up inside of me at the sight of her, but I push it down. A pet project I made out of a mixture of grief and boredom, the sheer wrongness of her is both a reminder and a promise to retrieve the genuine article. By the raw scale and breadth of the biomancy and cognomancy I have subjected this person to, I doubt any living person would guess that this was once the man responsible for the lapse in security which ended in the death of Vita's sister. She is wearing an outfit that only very technically qualifies as underwear, because the degree to which I currently have her set to be enamored with me is a bit too high. "Hello, Nugas," I greet her back, allowing her to walk behind me as I quickly step past her. "Anything of note happen while I was away?" Margaret has been adapting poorly to her new form and cracked herself falling down the stairs, Nugas reports. She suspects she will need your assistance repairing it. "Is she in any immediate danger?" I ask, frowning. "None. Just minor damage." "Anything else, then?" "Yes. Sky is here to see you. He has been waiting for a few hours." "Oh?" I hum. "Just Sky?" "Yes, ma'am. Capita was not with him. He arrived the long way, and flew in sopping wet about fucking time. Watcher's eyes, Templars are so incompetent when I actually need them." I briskly alter course to the guest lounge, immediately spotting Sky, who has, indeed, seemed to have brought enough water with him to damage all of the furniture despite being fully capable of drying himself telekinetically. The absolute fuck. I must admit, the young man is some of my finest work, completely different from his previous self except in soul. Tall and broad-shouldered, his custom-designed skeletal structure and angular face portray the roguish attractiveness best suited to a man with the kind of non-musculature that forms on a person for whom the concept of exercise is fundamentally obsolete. He lifts off the couch the moment I enter the room, dashing towards me like a ravenous honeybee, quite certain that flowers are 5 feet tall and possess 4 limbs. "Where the fuck have you been?" he demands, a full-bodied panic filling his every word. "Sky, you lay about. Did you know that it is actually quite normal for a person to not spend 100% of their time in their house?" I taunt him anyway, ignoring his distress. "They got Capita," he hisses. I know this already, as that's the only reason he would ever arrive without her. I raise my eyebrows in surprise anyway. "Who did?" I ask, already knowing the answer. "Where is she?" I press, knowing he'd already be there if he knew the answer. Conversations would be much easier if everyone would just politely agree to skip to the parts that matter, but culture demands the exchange of pointless drivel, and I am too well trained to not supply it. The fucking Templars. They must have ambushed her while she was separate. When half of her didn't come back, we went out looking for her, but I fucked up and let her out of my sight, and now I don't know where they took her. You have to find her, Vesuvius." "I will, I promise honestly. I didn't go through all the effort of helping the Templars plan a way to capture her just so I could leave her to rot. It took me over a fucking year to confirm that the Inquisitors run a top-secret prison in the forest without raising any red flags, and Lynn finally finished tracking the scent I forced then soon-to-be Inquisitor Yelisavetta's body to start producing, which she could track because I gave her Inquisitor Yelisavetta's sense of smell. Then the only damn problem became getting enough firepower to actually break into the place and make it back out. Netta, Matteo, and Lynn were obvious picks, but I needed someone with the raw brute force necessary to clear a way in and out. I needed Sky, and there was not a singular chance that I was going to get him. Sky, Capita, and I actually have built quite the friendly relationship in the years after the Perception event. Sure, he murdered my entire family, and while I miss no opportunity to goad him about that fact, if I am being honest, it's a point in his favor. Audacity is attractive, and so other people I use biomancy to make very attractive. Long story short, on a few occasions I've had the opportunity to test the equipment I gave him, with Capita's blessing, and on one memorable night, her assistance. I don't love the man, far from it, even, because he is an annoying, selfish piece of shit, but our relationship is friendly even if we are not friends. Despite this, I knew he would reject any plan to rescue Vita. Sky nurses a burning grudge for having actually lost a fight for the first time in his life, and while Capita would be sympathetic, she would ultimately choose Sky's safety over Vita's freedom. The process of freeing Vita would certainly be dangerous, but even more so she herself is the danger. I rather doubt the years have made my Vita any more positively inclined to Sky than he to her, and she is in every way the rock to his scissors. Sky has the kind of absurd power that could let him go toe-to-toe with a High Templar and possibly even win depending on which one he faces, but Sky is at his weakest when tossing projectiles from a distance. At point-blank range, he can rip a person apart from the inside faster than a blink, yet his inability to get close to Vita without dying fundamentally unnerves a man that is used to being invincible. But there's one thing that can invariably move him to act. I don't want to understand whatever part of Capita's insane mind makes her love Sky, but for all his many faults he truly does love her in return. And as an animancer, well, there's only one place they could have sent her. You'd fucking better, Sky growls. Get your bloodhound on her yesterday, Vesuvius, or I swear I'll save your yammering, Sky. I told you I will, I snap at him. On one condition. When you go to break her out, if Vita is there. Fine, yes, he concedes immediately. Ha. Too easy. Wonderful. I will send Lynn out first thing tomorrow. You will send her out now, Sky demands. I tilt my head ever so slightly, passing my tongue absent-mindedly over the inside of my lips as I decide how to deal with that. Sky, I say evenly. Because I understand what you are going through right now, I won't shove you in a bathtub and make you fill it with your own pus for trying to give orders in my own fucking house. But let me be very clear, you will not dictate to me the proper method of retrieving a loved one from the Templars. You are an insipid, petulant brat that knows nothing about the subject, and you will do exactly as I say if you want to have any hope of returning with her alive. Oh yeah, because you're so damn good at getting people back from the Templars, he sneers. I do not give him the satisfaction of flinching at that. Some plans just take longer than others, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. I doubt Vita has had a pleasant 2 years, but she's strong. She'll be fine, and she'll understand the importance of optimizing success chances. You're the one crawling to me, I counter. Feel free to be thankful that you get to reap the benefits of my preparation. I will send Lynn tomorrow, because I am under observation, and rushing off to give her orders mere hours after Capita goes missing will make it a lot harder to get her back than just waiting a little while. I visit Vita's family every morning. This is when I will tell her, and we will move to retrieve Capita when Lynn finds where they took her. Again, I already know where they have to be taking her, but I need a few days to prepare for the assault anyway, and Sky doesn't need to know the details for that. He lets out an irritated huff and floats away, which is about as close as he gets to conceding an argument. Finally, the fucking pieces are in play. I'm coming for you, Vita. It won't be long now. Yo, Jaleesa. Wake up. My mind sputters and screams as I'm jolted awake by yelling voices and pounding on my door, the cacophony mixing with a brutal assault of sights, smells, feelings and sensations. I'm vaguely aware of the stiff immobility of my body, seized up and ignoring the quiet remains of rationality in my mind, trying to keep together the rapidly shattering structure of my sanity, rebuilding it in the midst of a hurricane. Chilled sweat clings to my skin as I feel every microscopic divot and contour of the mattress below my back. No blanket covers me, the uniform chill of the air far less distracting than the feel of cotton on flesh. The stench of mold and my own body mixes with the subtle undertones of stone, tiny cracks leaking out the scent of dirt and worms and ant pheromones. Each one crawls up my nose, fighting for my attention as I beg them to leave me alone. Even with eyelids firmly shut, the subtle differences in the light pressing itself through them pours into my head and refuses to go unanalyzed, demanding that I see through the skin of my own face. And worst of all, that fucking pounding on my door, punctuated by Vicky's insistent words that my brain can barely register, all echoing around the room and attacking me from different angles, highlighting the sound of my every breath and heartbeat, jolting my head with each smack of her fist, each impatient shift of her weight. I am, for a dozen horrifying seconds, not Templar Yelizaveta but instead a disembodied assault of qualia, drowning my sense of self in agony. Filter, filter, filter. My mind screams as I swim through the storm, gathering my focus and reassembling my mind. Filter, filter, filter. These things do not need to be acknowledged. I can let them flow through me without acknowledgement. Filter, filter. Jaleesa. We have a prisoner transport today. I know I fucking know. Shut up for 5 seconds. Hearing my own name is like a battering ram against my focus, forcing itself through the walls I've been so desperately crafting. But slowly, agonizingly, I rebuild myself and manage to respond. I'm getting up, I call back to my partner, voice strained. Please don't make any noise for a second. Oh, fuck, sorry, she whispers, which is the opposite of not making noise, but at least she whispered. Altogether, the time between my rude awakening and the moment when I'm finally enough of a person again to stand up and start my day is barely 30 seconds, but I swear to the watcher it always feels like hours. This one was worse than usual, as for once I was actually pretty deep in sleep when I got jolted out of it. I have not been sleeping well at all, and it will probably be months before I really get used to my room here enough to change that. And that's assuming I don't get subjected to whatever the fuck decontamination is again. A minute later I have my armor on and I'm walking out the door to my room, an embarrassed Victoria waiting for me. Sorry, she mumbles again. I forgot. It's fine, I sigh. I'm used to it. But seriously, just whisper my name once and I'll be up. I almost feel bad for lying, it's not really fine. I absolutely hate waking up like that and it tends to color my entire day. But it's true that I'm used to it, and Victoria has enough shit to deal with to be overly worried about my problems. She's obviously under a lot of stress, from the tight muscles twisting under her skin as she moves to the fatty aroma of her sweat. She's also obviously still pregnant, meaning she has been for nearly 2 months now. I want to talk to her about it, see if there's anything I can do to help out, but it's kind of an awkward subject to breach. Naturally, she has no obvious visual signs of pregnancy this early into it. So I really don't want her to ask how I know she's kept the child. Oh, well, I just noticed that milky, babyish scent is still permeating your vaginal discharge. Why yes, I do smell that kind of thing constantly from everyone around me, thank you for asking. It's not the most awkward way I've ever lost a friend, but it would be up there. Ugh, I wish I was talentless. Still, I eventually figure out a way to delicately breach the subject. You want to talk about that thing with Vito at all? I comment as the two of us head upstairs. She shrugs, a fresh layer of stress sweat leaking out of her armpits. She's actually kind of lucky in that her stench isn't too bad by stress sweat standards. It won't stand out to anyone else. She stayed quiescent the whole time you were in decontamination. It was no big deal. We both know that's not what I was referring to, but I get the hint that I shouldn't press. Well, that's good, I acknowledge. Quiescent, huh? That's a fun word. Really flows off the tongue. Vicky snorts with amusement, the mucus in her nose sounding like it's left over from a nasty run-in with either allergies or crying. Probably the latter. You caught me red-handed, she admits. I just like to say it. We both chuckle at that, and I take the win. She'll talk if and when she's ready, and I will be here if she needs me, because I'm not allowed to leave. We reach the top floor of the facility, taunting me by dint of proximity to the surface. I'd really like to see the Mistwatcher's golden sky again, but that's not in the cards today. We're just accepting the 2 new prisoners and escorting them to their rooms. The top floor of Site 4 is an enormous trap designed to kill everyone in it. A magic-powered elevator is the only way to off from the surface, with both the elevator itself and the pathway to it watched at all times, devoid of cover and lined with bolt holes from which spells and arrows can blast through to annihilate anyone stupid enough to walk through without permission. I can hear and feel the various deadly implements aimed at me from all around the room, because you never take allegiance for granted in a prison full of animancers. Forget the emotional abuse and pregnancy and all that shit, it's a wonder that any of the inquisitors here aren't completely stressed out of their fucking minds. I don't know how Captain Manus holds himself together. The glass elevator descends, and inside it 2 Templars flanking the collared form of a twitching young woman come into view. Her mostly pink hair is obviously dyed, roots of reddish-brown hair showing where it has started to grow out. Her olive skin tone is marred with splashes of pink across one cheek. Her arms and fingers are tied behind her back, and in general she looks utterly miserable, her shaking lower lip joining her involuntary convulsions as if she's about to burst into tears at any moment. Her soul is jagged and broken, stitched back together in a style that I've come to recognize as a relatively early Ars victim. Based on her age she must have been experimented on as a child, probably no more than 3 or 4 years old, then stuck under the thumb of a monster for many years after. So, this is Capita, our new Delta-class prisoner. The combination of cognomancy, offensive chaos magic, and motherfucking teleportation means she is absolutely zero tolerance collar on at all times. And according to the reports, this isn't all of her. Her words. The elevator heads back up and returns back down, and it's easy to see why the second prisoner now on it also only answers to Capita. She's nearly identical to the first woman, in both body and soul. What I once assumed was a haphazard splash of paint on her face is apparently quite carefully applied, as even that matches the other Capita perfectly. When she spots her twin, she immediately starts to struggle, mewling like an abused cat behind her gag as she tries to step through the glass door and touch her matching experiment. The Templars flanking her yank her back. Oh boy, this is going to be another problem case. Careful, one of the Templars grunts at us as they approach to hand the Capitas off. They're not very strong, but they're feisty. The twins stare at each other, and I can see thin, purple strands reach out from the cracks in the middle of their soles to try and touch each other. The collars give each of them a warning zap, and the threads dissolve as they convulse in response. Is that why they're so similar? Do they use cognomancy to remove their differences? They look so unwell. Is that because of the cognomancy, or because they can't use it anymore? I can see that, I say, nodding at the Templar. Thanks. We'll take them from here. Capita, will you walk with us? I carefully position my gaze between the two of them, trying to make it ambiguous which one I'm speaking to. As I'd hoped, it seems to relax them a little. They glance between me and each other, then nod helplessly, allowing themselves to be transferred to Vicky and I without protest. They walk in front of us, letting themselves be guided down the stairs. So, I say casually, starting to remove the gag of my Capita the moment we get to the stairwell. Welcome to Site 4. I know that you two are probably less than stoked to be here, but I promise things aren't as bad as you may be afraid of. No, Capita growls as soon as she's able. Wrong. Do not tear this sketch in half. Huh? I ask. She doesn't want to be called you two, Vicky clarifies, to my surprise. She's saying that both Capitas are the same person with two bodies. Is that right, Capita? Capita seems surprised, but she nods happily. Yes. Yes. Please, cease separating me from myself. How did you get all that? I ask Vicky. One of Altrix's selves calls herself a sketch, too, she explains, shrugging. Capita just kind of seems like a reverse Altrix, you know? A brief moment of clarity seems to pass over Capita, both of them, both of her bodies, I guess, suddenly ceasing their constant twitching. Sister is alive? She mutters quietly. Oh, are you two related? Vicky asks happily. Yeah, Altrix is a friend of mine. Work hard and try to get up to level 4 permissions, okay? Then I can set up some dates for you to visit. I suppress a shudder. Holy shit, what a thing to say to a person. Work hard and I will let you see a long-lost family member again? Please, Capita begs, before anything else, let me be myself. Once again, those thin purple threads from each body start snaking towards each other, questing slowly out of their respective souls. I assume that much like Vita's tentacles, the threads are free to move as the collar won't trigger until it senses any mana pushing through them, but once it does. Capita, I need you to stop that, Vicky says firmly. Please, Capita begs. Please. Sorry, I say, feeling like someone ought to. You understand why we can't let you cast, don't you? I know, Capita agrees desperately. I know. Please. I won't run or hurt you. Please. I glance at Vicky, who shrugs subtly in my direction. Unfortunately, Capita won't even be allowed in the same cell as her other half. There's not much either of us can do about that. I can only be broken for so long before the shards no longer fit, Capita pleads helplessly. I sigh. Damn it. Maybe I can recommend a fast track up the ranks? I say to Vicky. And if we get a good enough metamancer we should be able to block off teleportation without too much trouble. Nuh-uh, no way, Jaleesa, Vicky protests immediately. If you try to fast-track a cognomancer right after she shows up your ass is going into decontam for a week. I mean, if it helps. Fuck no. Don't you drop all your work on me, Vicky grumbles. I'll end up screwing over all your progress with the Epsilon. Oh, she's probably frustrated that I got authorization to promote V2 up to Epsilon 2 today. I didn't think about that, but I guess it's understandable. I haven't 100% decided if I am going to do it, but I figure it will be pretty difficult for her to hug that stuffed animal we got on the shipment today if she can't use her arms. Still, I can't look at Capita's 2 faces and 2 broken souls and not feel sorry for her. Poor fucking girl. I can't believe an actual human person made other people into things like this. It just doesn't make any sense in my mind. Why? Why would anyone do this, let alone a High Inquisitor? I suppose some of the rumors say he never truly was one. They say that in the middle of the Ars Crisis, people started noticing inconsistencies in the records, places where he seemed to have slipped into history as if from nowhere. The Inquisition, after all, wasn't a publicly known branch of the Templars at the time. A very limited number of people were privy to the identity of the High Inquisitor, and rumor says that gave Ars exactly the opening he needed to make the whole world believe it was just something he always was. No evidence exists to prove it, but who knows what the real truth is when dealing with a man capable of twisting memories and allegiances as casually as a chef would stir a pot. Again, so they say. I was, 12 at the time? 13? My only real memory of the Ars Crisis is the constant fear, waking up in the night to the sounds of battle as his twisted splices fought Templars to death in the streets. The paranoia that any living thing could be one of his agents, or maybe even Ars himself. Your neighbor, your grocer, your dog, there was always that subtle terror of uncertainty that anyone you know and love could be pulled away and warped into a monster without any outward sign of it. That is what people remember when they hear the name Inquisitor. I don't blame a single other Templar for hating me now that I'm one of them. But sometimes we just have to take a hit to do the right thing. No matter how hard we get knocked down, a Templar stands up again. And despite everything, despite my disgrace, that's still what I am. An Inquisitor was needed, so I answered the call. Despite her protests, we lock each captor into a different cell. I promised to return and check on them soon, my mind already spinning with ways to try and help their situation. Maybe it will help if I ferry messages back and forth? I don't know. I'll think of something. I have to. In the meantime, the rest of our day still needs doing. My thoughts a messy jumble. I decide to start my rounds visiting a Gamma 5 prisoner by the name of Jeremiah. He's a learned necromancer who likely knows a bit of cognomancy, though it's never been confirmed. Obviously, he hasn't practiced any animancy since being imprisoned just under a decade and a half ago. Most animancers in the prison were caught in the wake of the Ars Crisis, when the lookout for them was at its all-time high. All gathered evidence, and Jeremiah's own insistence, indicates that he was never involved with Ars, but he's the closest I've got, so I still feel the need to ask him a few questions. I knock on his door and wait for him to call me inside, unlocking the room and stepping in. The 40-something-year-old man grins brightly as I walk in, standing up from a rocking chair and snapping the book he was reading shut with one hand. He's a thin, academic-looking man with the occasional flick of grey in his otherwise black short-cropped hair and moustache. His room smells like spices and paper, clean and refined and only slightly disorienting. Ah, Yelisaveta, a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Sincerest apologies, I'll put on a pot of tea immediately. You know I'm not actually allowed to drink anything you brew, I answer, grinning under my helmet. He winks at me. That's no reason to be barbaric, he protests, smiling wider. A gentleman should always offer. At level 5 permissions, Jeremiah has access to a pretty nice if somewhat cramped apartment room, fully furnished with a modest kitchenette and private bathroom. He has often joked that the only reason he's not level 6 is that he'd have to leave his room if they released him back to society, though when pressed he'll admit the real reason. As a moderately skilled animancer, he would need to either consent to having the knowledge removed from his mind or apply to join the Inquisition himself, and he doesn't consider either to be a palatable option. So what brings you here this early? I quite enjoyed our last philosophical scuffle. You're a sharper wit than that last fellow, and, if I may be permitted to say so, much easier on the eyes. You've never once seen me with my helmet off, Jeremiah, I remind him, chuckling at the compliment anyway. He's such a goof, it's hard to imagine him as a dangerous animancer now. At least, it is until I glance at his collar. He does indeed make himself a cup of tea, as usual offering me one which I'm always required to decline. Of course, drinking isn't actually why he brewed it, his politeness is more than just an amusing joke. Most kinds of tea are agonizingly putrid, strong-smelling in all the wrong ways, but Jeremiah pressed me over and over about my favorite kind of tea until I finally gave in and told him about one that I can actually stand the stink of. Now he makes it every time I walk into his cell, and I couldn't be more thankful for it. I sit down in one of the other chairs as he returns to his favorite seat, sipping the warm brew mildly. So, in all seriousness, how can I help you today, Inquisitor? He asks. No Inquisitor stuff, thankfully, I reassure him. At least none beyond the usual. I just wanted to ask. Why did you want to learn animancy? He hums, enjoying another sip. That's the kind of question I will have to tattle to your peers if they come asking. I shrug. Yeah, there are a lot of questions like that. Which is a shame, but I get the necessity for it. Still, I want to understand. He nods, considering his answer for a moment. Well, firstly I think it's important to understand that back in my day there was no Ars Rania, yes? He says. Animancy was still illegal, of course, but a different sort of illegal. You could joke about animancy 30 years ago without anyone looking at you like you suddenly grew a second head, because the cruel and wretched reality of that kind of magic was not so raw in anyone's mind. There had been no one like ours in the history of Vulca, no context for exactly why it was as wretched a sin as it is considered today. But it was still a sin, I point out. A serious one. Well, I suppose this is the part that always blows the minds of the deeply religious, he answers, smirking playfully. Some of us think that you are wrong. Some of us believe that what you call sin is pointless oppression, baseless ramblings from old fools too caught up in their own traditions to look at the world with fresh eyes. And we are not mindless fools for doing so. There are good reasons that animancy is illegal, I insist. There are good reasons it shouldn't be, as well, he says, holding up a hand to stop me from protesting. I no longer believe what I did 25 years ago. The benefits are not worth the risks. That doesn't mean the benefits don't exist. As a young man I imagine skeletal horses in the streets, ferrying the public wherever they wish to go. I imagined undead laborers tilling the fields, replacing the repugnancy of slavery that infects the country with mindless, humane automatons. I imagined an army of rotting monsters pushing back the edges of the forest, fighting the oppression of Verdantop without loss of human life. To me, they were dreams worth pursuing. And so when I stumbled upon an old tome that survived the purges and gathered myself some like-minded friends to learn that which we were banned from knowing, we did it with the burning fire of righteousness in our hearts. I frown, thinking about that. I can see it, I suppose. I don't know very much about necromancy, but it's my understanding that any soul will do, not just the souls of people. The problem is that learning to control dead animals gives you everything you need to know about controlling dead humans. It does sound like a wonderful dream, I admit. I wish there was a safe way to do it. His smile turns sad, and he nods at me. Exactly, he agrees. We thought we were heroes. And that, well, that is when everything started to go wrong. I'm sure you've heard the story before. Blah blah, greater good, blah blah, power corrupts. It's no less true just because it's a cliché. It's so easy to justify evil in the heat of the moment, when it feels like you have no other option. The goal becomes such a perfect goodness in the mind's eye that it's blinding. You forget to ask yourself if the goal is worth what you've trampled along the way. He sips his tea some more, leaving me to chew on his words while I enjoy the scent. Power is kind of frightening, I eventually comment. I'm really glad I don't have very much. To my surprise, Jeremiah starts laughing, nearly choking on his tea. Quite an incongruous thing for a warden to say to her prisoner, isn't it? He asks, eyes twinkling with mirth. I chuckle a bit as well, embarrassed. Sorry, you're right. That was insensitive. My point was not to say it's insensitive, he corrects softly. My point was to say it's inaccurate. Be careful with that, Yelisaveta. If you fool yourself as to how much power you hold, you can do nothing but abuse it. I blink, feeling duly chided. But something about that feels off. I mean no offense, but if that's how you feel, I ask slowly, why do you remain here? You're powerful, aren't you? Shouldn't you use that power, or at least give it up? His smile grows especially wide, a subtle shift in his posture indicating to me that I've inadvertently touched on something important. Part of power is knowing who should be trusted with it, he answers coyly. The conversation shifts to less serious subject after that, but even as I leave his cell I find myself thinking on his last words. As an animancer, he can join the Inquisition or lose his ability to cast animancy. In the former case, his power works for the Templars. In the latter case, well, I suppose it's not unreasonable to think that if other Inquisitors can remove memories, they can probably keep them as well. Either way, his knowledge, whatever it is, ends up in Templar hands. And I suppose it makes sense that he doesn't particularly trust the organization that has kept him imprisoned all these years. But was he implying more than that? And if so, should I be looking into it? The only people that can really check the Inquisitors are other Inquisitors. It is part of my job to internally police the organization, but if the corruption is within Site 4, I wouldn't be able to tell anyone about it because I can't contact anyone outside Site 4. So what would be the point of looking? Okay, that's actually the exact line of thought that would enable corruption, isn't it? Now I've got myself worried. It's the worst possible time for doubts, too, since I'm about to check up on Vita for the first time today. I sigh in annoyance the moment I step through the second set of security doors, the familiar yet still overwhelming scent of piss and shit attacking my face immediately. Watcha damn it, Vita, you said you didn't have to go last night, I grumble, setting down the soup I brought in the corner of the room so it's nowhere near her while I wipe her ass. I kneel down and shake her a little, snapping my fingers in front of her face and soul eye. Naturally, she doesn't respond, so I remove the bindings over her mouth. She likes to talk and or eat when she wakes up, and I doubt anyone likes waking up with a clamp over their jaw. That leaves me to the near-futile practice of holding my breath as I loosen and pull down her trousers. Ugh, so disgusting. I use a wet cloth to wipe off the inside of her thigh and nearly shit my own damn self as a motherfucking eyeball opens underneath my fingers. Dick in a sock. I swear, leaping backwards. The thigh tracks me with inhuman precision as the rest of Vita seems to groggily wake up. The three eyes on her face blink slowly, each out of sync with one another as her soul blearily looks around for a few short moments before all of them zero in on me at once. Oh, Vita mumbles. Hey, Jaleesa. That wasn't there before, I insist, pointing at her disturbingly placed optical organ as I tried to get my breathing back under control. She glances down at her own thigh, quickly waking up and letting her features settle into a scowl. Ugh, she growls. No, it wasn't. I can't believe I'm growing more of these things. The eye twitches around in her leg as she practices moving it, sending an involuntary shudder of revulsion through my body. I approach anyway, still needing to finish cleaning her up. So, you didn't grow that on purpose then? I ask. Fuck no, she snaps. Why would I want an eyeball that just rubs up against my pants all day? So your body is just growing entire eyeballs on its own? Well, you've got me collared, Vita dismisses. It's not like I can cast spells on myself. With the supreme act of will I force myself not to react to that, but I know the effort is pointlessly wasted. It's Vita, obviously she's going to pick up on anything I feel. And maybe, I'm getting a false positive here. But for the first time since meeting her, I just got a clear impression that her words were a lie. Only after I finish my dirty cleaning work do I have the courage to look at her face. She's as blank as usual, giving no indication that she knows what I suspect. Still, I'm not sure what to do about it. Those terrifying words from her file ring through the back of my mind, demoted from Epsilon 3 to Epsilon 1 after lethal altercation with staff. How did a magic-blocked little girl kill a trained Templar under Epsilon level security? Obviously, I asked that question as soon as I got out of her cell the first time. I did not at all like the answer. We don't know. You came here wanting to ask a different question, Vita reminds me. I blink, nodding in agreement as I finish fetching her a clean pair of pants. Then I grab the soup, quickly reheating it with thermomancy and spoon-feeding her to her clear delight. She's not wrong, I wanted to have one more conversation with her before I officially promote her to Epsilon 2. Although reminding me why she's in security level 1 in the first place is about the worst way to start that conversation. Yeah, I confirm. I want to talk to you about raising your permissions. She cackles, smiling like a mad dentist pulled her lips back for a tooth inspection. It makes her look far more in pain than it does happy, but all of her expressions are weird. She says she hasn't been emoting much over the years and it shows. The way she pulls her own face around without even using her muscles leads to all kinds of freakish, impossible expressions. I just have to accept that it's going to happen and pay attention to other cues on how she actually feels. You just want me to be able to use my arms so that I can piss without your help, she accuses. I smirk a little, though my helmet blocks any vision of it. She'll pick up on my amusement regardless, of course. I would be lying if I did not admit that is part of my motivation, I tell her honestly. She cackles again. I can actually stand you, you know? You don't try to hide shit, and I can actually get your sense of humor. So sure, why the fuck not? I need to practice moving again anyway. What do you need from me? I let out a deep breath, setting the now empty soup bowl down beside me. I need you to tell me why you killed the Inquisitor before me, I say. Her expression goes back to blankness. Not how I killed him? She asks. Better Templars than I have tried to extract that answer and failed, I shrug. So no. Just why is enough for me. I want to know what would drive you to murder a person. Her body stays still, but I watch her spiritual tendrils twist furiously at the memory. A lot of things, I guess, Vita mutters. I feel like it's no more than most people, though. When I kill, it's to protect me or my family from being killed by someone else. So you're saying he was going to kill you? I ask, a bit confused. As an Epsilon class, we are very explicitly not allowed to kill her, and the guards outside would have certainly stopped any attempt. No, she says, tapping a small soul inside her belly with a tendril. It's small and black, floating snugly right above her own soul's core along with a slimy, bubbly soul with small tendrils of its own and a soul of solid water. He found something that would work. He found a way to remove them. My eyes open wide, drawing conclusions together. Now that makes sense. Hell, that's part of my job. But Vita believes that souls that go to the Mistwatcher are destroyed beyond repair. She, arrogantly, considers herself to be the only afterlife in the world. So she would believe a method to remove the souls inside her tantamount to a death threat against her family, friends, and hundreds of others. She's wrong. Horribly, tragically wrong. The poor girl is twisted and furious and confused, full of hate and bitterness. But she's not evil. She lashes out and hurts people because it's the only way she has to feel a semblance of control, because she has been abused and stepped on and only taught the lessons of strength versus strength. I have to believe that good will shine through if she's shown a little kindness and love. Okay then, I say, nodding. That's all I really needed to know. Then, to her surprise, I actually surprised her, I gently pull her away from the wall and start undoing the bindings that tie her arms behind her back. She'll still have to keep the finger restraints, but they won't be completely preventing movement. She should still be able to do most basic tasks with her hands. When I completely free her arms, I finally get to see that soul-filled snake that seemed to be running down her sleeve, a tentacle of pale flesh, growing out of her elbow. My breath catches. Eyeballs and tentacles. Seeing it in the physical, it's impossible to ignore the comparison. And she's not doing it on purpose? No, no. Well damn, I didn't think you would accept that answer, Vita mutters, breaking me from my thoughts. Time to enjoy learning to wipe my ass with mittens on, I guess. Yep, congratulations, I say, half joking but mostly honest. But that's not all. Oh? She blandly asks, shakily getting to her feet as she flexes her arms for the first time in almost 2 months. Yep, I confirm. I've got a surprise for you, but it'll have to wait until lunchtime. She huffs air from her nose, scowling slightly at her new, fleshy appendage as it writhes freely around. Well, consider me hungry, she says. I always do. The rest of the morning is rough, my shitty sleep and painful awakening tainting the long hours between dawn and the second meal of the day. But it's worth it, all of it is worth it for the moment I return. I re-enter Vita's cell with the plushie behind my back, unsure why the sender wanted it to reach her but hopeful that it will give her some comfort from home. She is still upright when I arrive, pacing around the room with an awkward gait, flinching as her sore muscles protest each and every movement. Jaleesa, she grunts as greeting, still walking. I don't smell any food. Don't worry, I have food outside. I've got something else for you first, though. I reveal the stuffed bird from behind my back, holding it out to her carefully. Lazily, she glances my way, but as she sees what's in my hands her whole body halts, mouth hanging slightly open, paralyzed with surprise. Slowly, haltingly, as if it can't possibly be real, she stutters towards me, lifting the toy from my hands and staring at it with disbelief. Orozco? She whispers. Ta-da! I cheer happily. Someone tried to send this to you over a year ago, but I finally got the request to ship it pushed through a little while ago. It just arrived on today's delivery. I'm not sure if Vito is even paying attention to me, however, her whole body shaking as she pulls the stuffed animal close to her chest and squeezes hard enough to flatten it, a startlingly normal smile ever so slightly starting to twitch on her lips. Then the shaking intensifies, her eyes water, and she starts to sob. The disturbing, inhuman monster is washed away by her tears, leaving only the vulnerable little girl underneath. A young woman, perhaps, barely 18 but still far too young to be expected to handle the challenges the Mistwatcher gave her. "He's yours," I promise her, squatting down alongside her as she collapses to her knees. "Not just when I'm here. He's squishy and safe and officially Epsilon security approved." "You brought him back," she blubbers, sucking in great hiccuping gasps between every breath. "Thank you. Thank you." "You're welcome," I answer warmly, for once appreciating my ability to soak in her full-bodied joy with all of my senses. "You want some food?" She nods her head rapidly, too caught up in the throes of her tears to articulate an answer. I have the goofiest possible grin beaming under my helmet, but I suppose I'll be the only one to know about it. I turn and start walking out of the cell to go fetch her summer lunch. Behind me, between her sobbing gasps of joy, she manages to whisper words with such gratitude, such honesty, that it chills me to my bones. I will never forget them, not in my waking hours or my nightmares. "You get to live," she promises me,